It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
Welcome to The Sam Lesante Show, folks. Today, a very important show, folks, for everybody, women, men. My guest today from the Schuylkill Women In Crisis is Sally Casey, who is the Executive Director, and Valerie Clay, who is the President of the Board of Directors. And I say it's important because what we're going to talk about is information. I was just asking Sally, you're talking about how many women in the country? 1 out of every 4?
The estimate by the CDC is that 1 in 4 women will experience intimate partner violence over the course of her lifetime. Now,
Schuylkill Women In Crisis, folks, is an opportunity for you to, if you know of anybody that's being abused or whatever, I highly suggest that you call the hotline, and we're going to put the hotline up throughout the program. It's 570-622-6220. Now, Sally, let's talk about, so for those people, what is the Schuylkill Women In Crisis, which we'll refer to as SWIC? What is it?
Well, we're a private nonprofit. We were founded by local volunteers in 1983 who were concerned about the prevalence of domestic and sexual violence as well in the community and the lack of services available to assist victims. And so after our founding, we worked diligently to try to establish comprehensive services. That's very important when you're working with survivors of domestic and sexual violence, because the violence impacts virtually every area of their lives. They may have to leave their home, they may have to go to work, go back to school, move their children to a different school, any number of things. And so you really need comprehensive services available to assist them. Some people will say, well, what are you talking about when you talk about domestic violence, Sally, too? If, my husband calls me names or won't give me money, that's not violence. Do you still help people like me? And yes, we do. We consider abuse any type of behavior that reoccurs over time, and it's aimed at having power and control over the victim. It's not an isolated incident, but it's a pattern, and it typically becomes more frequent and more severe over time.
So when you say comprehensive, what do you mean by say comprehensive?
Well, our first service that was so important and remains so important today is that 24-hour hotline. Domestic and sexual violence don't typically happen Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. They happen on night, weekends. So that hotline is often the victim's safety line to help. But when she calls us, we can provide her information about the other services available both through SWIC and the community to help her. So among those we operate a shelter. We were on your program several years ago. I'm really pleased. We have a beautiful facility. We can offer shelter to victims and their children. We also operate at 8 transitional houses. Women are often concerned about, well, where am I going to go when my shelter stay ends? Or I don't want to be in a shelter, I want my own place. So we have these homes that they can stay in for up to 2 years, because very often they need to pursue maybe an education, other services in the community to help them become independent and free. We have counseling. Many of the women that we work with have to go to court, so we have staff that can accompany them there. And I'm going to ask Val to talk a little bit about some of the new legal services that we just have available.
Before we get to Val, okay, I'm going to get to you, Val.
Okay.
Yeah, this is, first of all, it's great. I think it's fabulous that you have an organization like SWIC, because we're the women, or some time men, turn to. But there's always this, it's very difficult, I think. Now, you see it all the time, Sally. Very difficult if someone's being abused, okay? A woman being abused, whatever, and for her to pick up that phone and call, because then it's, what happens to my family? Will he get worse? Will, my kids, and it's, maybe I should just suffer through this. Maybe I should try to talk to him. Maybe I should try to get counseling or whatever. And in some cases it gets worse, okay, which you've seen. It's a very difficult choice to make, okay?
It is.
So And I feel sorry for anybody who has to make that phone call, okay? But when really should they make the call, and how comfortable should they feel? So they feel they're not going to be in a situation where, my God, if he finds I call this place, I'm going to get a beat, okay?
Well, you raise some really important points here, Sam, because it takes a lot of courage to make that first call. But one of the things that women often believe is that they should only call us if they've made a decision that they want to end the relationship or that they want, a divorce. And that's not what we're about. What we work with women to do is to make them aware of what services are available to help them with whatever path it is that they choose to take. So for example, you hear a lot about protection from abuse orders. Many people don't realize that you can ask for a protection order and not have the offender evicted from the home. And that's important. Do we recommend it in every case? No, but it's ultimately the victim's decision about what she will do. You can call us anonymously. You don't have to give us your name. Our services are all confidential, so with the exception of child abuse, where we can identify a child, anything that you tell us is confidential. And our counselors are trained to talk with the caller immediately about that confidentiality provision and the requirement that we do have as reporters of child abuse.
So you're saying to me, Sally, if I'm experiencing abuse or whatever, maybe a call to your office, okay, just to get information. What should I do, okay, would be, they're not leaving their home, they at least get comfortable and knowing these are the options. Now remember, you know this, there's always two sides to a story, okay? So, and how do you address that? I mean, how do you know that this person, how do you know that the woman's not the person that's causing all these problems, okay? And basically, I'm just bringing the devil, I'm being the devil's advocate here.
Yeah, and that's important. Well, first of all, while I talked about that the abuse can be other than violent, one thing that's always, a rule with us, it is that we don't believe that violence is ever appropriate in a relationship between peers. And
when you say violence, you mean what?
Hitting, slapping, I have many arguments with my
pushing.
Wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not, okay,
yeah.
hitting.
Placing your hands on the other person in a way that's unwanted.
Right. So any husband or wife has not had a good fight. I don't know if they're really, we have our differences, okay, at one point in time. As you get older, they start to dissipate, as you know. But so the concern would be, so then you address the concern when the person's calling you.
Well, anytime, yes, and I do want to stress this, that that really is totally unacceptable in a relationship that one person is any way abusive with the other.
If it's habitual, let's assume they're in a situation and the husband or the wife pushes the husband or slaps him, etc. But this is a one-time occasion, etc. Do I call then? If
you can call if you want to. Probably if we go through with you, we'd ask you, when's the last time this happened? Is it a pattern?
Okay.
So I don't know that most people would think that, we had an argument and once I get pushed. And part of what's important too is what did the person intend when they did that?
Okay. So here's my concern again, is that if I want the person knowing that when they call you, they're not making a commitment, to open up Pandora's box here, because oh my God, what we want to do is get information. Okay,
right. This
is what's happening. Can you give me some advice? And it could be anonymous. They don't have to know it's Mrs. Smith or Mrs. Jones. Folks, I'm talking to the people running the Schuylkill Women in Crisis. Fabulous organization, folks. Believe me when I tell you. Sally Casey is the Executive Director, and Valerie Clay is the President of the Board of Directors. A lot of information here, folks. If you know of anybody who is in that situation, I highly recommend that you have them watch us. We're in 190 in the Comcast in Pottsville area, channel 13 and also 513 up here in the greater Hazleton area, and channel 92 in the Wilkes-Barre Kingston area. Just information to protect yourself. We know so many times where women have been abused, and God forbid, by the time they were being able to take care of, they had many bruises, who had broken noses, etc. It just gets terrible. We come back, we have a lot more to talk about. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. Remember, 24/7, you can watch all of our programming, all of the shows that we produce on ssptv.com. My email is sam@ssptv.com. Very important show today, folks. I'm talking to the people from the Schuylkill Women in Crisis and domestic violence. My guest today is Sally Casey. It's actually Sarah Casey. We call her Sally, who's the executive director, and Valerie Clay, who's the president of the board of the directors. Before we get to, I'm getting to you, I promise you, about fear. You were talking about, you
right,
want to...
Sam, I think, you know, in what you posed as a situation, typically, you know, if somebody has an argument, I've been married almost 40 years myself, you have an argument and, you know, your partner pushes you, but it's a rare occasion. I don't think it's going to trigger you to think, oh, gee, I wonder if this is abuse. So what we talk to victims about, we really focus on, are they afraid? Mm-hmm. And what are they afraid of? And we develop a safety plan.
And those women know who they are.
They know who they are.
They know who they are.
And it doesn't hurt to call us, though, because sometimes you go back and forth not sure, and we can help to...
Phone number is 570-622-6220. That's the hotline, and you don't have to tell them who you are. Valerie, first of all, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Okay, and you work at a great place, the Schuylkill, Penn State, down in that area. They do a great job down there.
Thank you.
Valerie, so you're the president of the board of directors. Okay, so what do you bring to the table?
For myself, I started with SWIC because I worked for Penn State, and we were having them on campus to bring prevention efforts, which I think is also important. I think as I've come into being the president, me alongside the rest of our board, we bring to the table our compassion, our desire to help in this situation, and as well as our volunteerism and some of our ideas.
You know, you said something, Valerie, that is so very important about prevention. Mm-hmm. Young women today, young men today, have every opportunity of knowing who they're dating, who their spouses will be. They could check their backgrounds, they could check their family histories, etc. Instead of just falling in love and just, you know, and we don't, and nothing changes. If you marry a line, you get a line. Okay, they don't change as far as I'm concerned. So prevention is letting them know how they treat you. And correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, I think that you're so you don't get into a situation, particularly with these kids who are using drugs. They know the dangers of it. Okay, and you know, if they find out who their peer groups is, you'll find out that they're just, in my estimate, scum. Okay, mm-hmm. Anybody who wants to destroy anyone's life through drugs is just terrible. But now when you're talking about prevention, which I think your SWIC does, mm-hmm. Okay, I think that's critical. Don't you think so?
Definitely.
Yeah, one thing you mentioned, though, Sam, is one thing that's a little bit different about domestic violence, and I know you said you can know anything because of the internet and the web about everybody. Very often who you see on the web is kind of like a PR job of who the person wants you to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so you may not know.
I'm talking about, you know, Sally Casey, okay, and I'm going to be, if I'm going to date Sally Casey, or you're going to date Sam Lesante, okay, you know who I am, and you know what I'm all about before you start getting involved, okay? If you see a temper, if you see a person using drugs, if you see abuse of alcohol, etc., it ain't going to change, okay? And you see, these are telltale signs, I think, that people can see. And college kids, okay, they're not stupid by no means. I mean, that's why I think the more information they get, the better it is. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right about if you see those things, you should see them as warning signs. But one of the things that people often find most shocking is that domestic violence often begins in pregnancy. It's the leading cause of birth defects in this country. Wow. And why that is because oftentimes the perpetrator doesn't start to become abusive until he feels like the woman has no other options other than to stay. So you are right, if you see those things, yes, it might be good to walk away, but that doesn't mean that if you don't see them beforehand that, they may not be there, but they're hidden.
If you're a Catholic and you're getting married, you go through, they have a program that you have to go through, which I think is fabulous.
It is.
Okay, and therefore you're learning these different things, because here again, knowing what you're getting involved with, okay. I'm writing a book called PSST. It's PSSST. It's called Patience, Solitude, Sacrifice, Silence, and Tolerance. And there'll be 5 chapters. And you got to pick any chapter you want. Because in life, you have to have that when you're married, okay? And so you need to have that. It's a two-way street. And God forbid, I've fallen many times, okay? By no question about it. But if you don't have that basic love, and if you don't have a faith, okay? I don't care what, this is only my opinion. If you don't have a faith and you don't have a substance in life, I think there's a lot of things that could happen that are not good things. That doesn't mean that it's the cure-all, but I think there should be opportunities where persons should have a faith in a practice. What do you feel about that, Valerie?
I think it's important to have a sense of faith. I think it's important. I think your book will definitely lead people to answer. You said you can go to any chapter, because they don't always happen in that order.
Exactly.
So I think that is important. Yes.
Yeah, I think too, again, having been married 40 years, I understand what you're saying and largely agree with it, but I think people too who are not of a particular denomination or faith, that these to me are just, good skills to have and good attributes for any relationship regarding of your beliefs.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
The thing is that it's like if you're getting better or something, and the doctor gives you a prescription, okay, so you follow the prescription, but there's other things you should be doing to help your body. Okay, so these are the things that I'm talking about that can help. With SWIC, the Schuylkill Women in Crisis and Domestic Violence, you provide that opportunity for, in case that person has to come to a place or needs housing. It's really critical, and I think when you get them, it's critical at the time. Correct?
It is.
I mean,
yes.
And maybe if they would have called you before that and used their services before that, we could have maybe prevented a situation that is abusive, okay?
Are you talking about like for offenders?
Yeah.
Well, typically we refer them to others for counseling. We don't work with both the victim and the offenders. So there is, for example, a group in our community called Clinical Outcomes Group, and they run a batterers intervention service. And kind of what you're alluding to goes back to our mission. We don't just provide services, but we try to create a community in which there's all these different services available, not all provided by SWIC. And so one of the things that we've worked hard to do is we got a grant so that the district attorney's office has a special prosecutor for these cases. And we don't want to see all these men go to jail. That's not typically the goal of the woman. Typically women will say, I don't want him to go to jail. I just want him to not be violent with me. And so you try to connect him to those services while at the same time having a probation officer who's holding him accountable.
And you said, I know Christine Holman, who is your district attorney in Schuylkill County, is extremely, supportive of what you're doing, and so is Salavanis in Luzerne County, our district attorney up here. But I know Christine on a show many times and mentioned how, how it's so important to work with, your organization, okay? And because there's a lot of things that happen, all right? But your funding, okay, is important. And speaking of funding, when we come back, folks, we're going to talk about how you can help a little bit, a day in the life of a sheltered resident. And if you're in a situation, any kind of situation, before it gets really out of hand, I highly recommend you calling them at 622-6220-570, of course, and just asking for information before it really gets really bad. Also for men. Men are a victim of domestic violence as well, correct?
Yes, men can be victims of abuse, but I think, and we certainly are, it's interesting to me, our data show that they correspond with the FBI's. So we have about 6% of the victims who come to us are men. But I also think it's much more important to think too, or as important to think about that greater group, you know, like the fathers and grandfathers who come to us as well, you know, that they're so grateful to us that we're able to provide shelter or transitional housing to their families because it's dangerous for them to. Or one of our most moving donations this last Christmas season was from a young man who said that he had been in the shelter as a child and, you know, hoped this would help some kids during the holiday season.
And we come back, folks, we're going to talk about how you get help in many ways. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us, folks. I'm Sam Lesante. You're watching us on HD 513 and Service Electric Cablevision, as well as channels 13 and 190 Comcast, 92 in the Mountaintop, Wilkes-Barre, Kingston area. My guest today, Sarah Casey, who is the Executive Director of Schuylkill Women in Crisis in Domestic Violence, and the Board of Directors President, Valerie Clay. Folks, if you just tune in, you know that we play this show many times, but also you can go to our website and watch this show on domestic violence. It's interesting to know what's available, particularly if you women or men are being abused anyway, just to get information. So now we're talking about, you do all these great things, and you know I could have a 2-hour show with this.
I know.
I mean, there's so much, and at one point in time, I'd love to be able to do another show just to talk about details, because I think the more information people have, the better off it is, and I appreciate you coming up, and maybe we could come down. But I don't like to show too much, because I want people to know it's very private, okay? That's why I have you on the set. So they need money. I mean, they're always looking for your support, because just a matter of just thinking about sheltering someone, they have to be, you know, sometimes clothed, fed, etc. You have something coming up to generate some money, right?
Yes, this is our annual golf challenge is coming up on April 29th.
I'm like it's a challenge, because that's what when I golf, it's a challenge every day. When is it? April what?
April 29th.
Yeah. And where's it at?
It's going to be at the Schuylkill Country Club.
Okay, very nice place.
Yes.
Okay. And if someone wants, are you taking donations for?
Well, we're taking donations. We're looking for volunteers. We're looking for golfers.
Yeah.
So if you want to create a foursome.
And what is? How much is it for?
It is
It's $130 to golf.
Okay.
But, you know, a big part of the event is sponsorship. So if anybody's interested in helping us with sponsoring too, you can go to our website. It's S-WIC.org. They can get information on there or call us. I know you're going to post our office number. Yeah. Call and we can get them information there too.
Okay, so if I want to get 4 people, it's 100 and how much?
130 a person, but if you wanted to be like $1,000 sponsor, then you could get the foursome. I believe it's $1,000. Don't hold me to that.
You get anything for the day, just the golfing?
Oh no, you get lunch, you get dinner.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean,
it's a whole day.
Yeah. Well, you put that all together. I mean, that's what people go out and spend if they're going to have a dinner and a golf thing. So it's very reasonable.
Right.
Okay. So it's $130 you want to golf. Plus, if you want to make a donation, if you want to buy a sponsorship for a hole, what are your whole sponsorships running?
They range.
They range?
There's a range.
Okay.
Yeah.
Starting from what?
I think $100.
Okay, so you want to make a $100 donation. Believe me, for what you do and what you provide, I think it's just great. And Valerie, keep up the great work. I mean, and Sally, you know, I could say is that, you know, you're getting younger.
We go back a long time.
Yeah,
Sam.
I mean, you're getting younger looking every time I see.
You too.
See what that?
Or our eyes, the vision's getting worse. One or the other, Sam, right?
Thank God for Dr. Bucci. My eyes are in great shape. I think anyway. Phone number, folks, for those the Schuylkill Women in Crisis, domestic violence. It's 622-6220. That's the hotline. Their number at the office is 622-3991. Folks, if you're in that situation, it just takes a phone call. Believe me, that's what it just takes one phone call for you to get some information to make your lives better. And if you want to, please help them out with their golf tournament. It's going to be interesting. It's April the 29th at the Schuylkill Country Club. It's a great place. We'll see you next time.